Welcome to For the Love of Books, Bees Books Edition, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries.
Hi, this is Jenny and I'm here to talk about Bees Books. And again for this episode we are Pari-less. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. We are without Pari. But I do have a lovely person here again to help me not babble too much for half an hour, and it is the lovely Sara. So hello Sara.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here, Jenny.
Oh, she is very enthusiastic, it's good. I'm very excited. So our theme this episode was Once Upon a Time, and I am very keen to see, I see you have 3 books there. I'm
Yes.
very keen to see what they are.
So the first book I've got is called Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. It's described as a riot of carnal pleasure by the Times and wonderfully strange by Esquire. The next book is called I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. It's a translation from French, and the key theme is imprisoned women trying to find a way to move forward through life without the impetus of the male gaze, which is quite interesting. The next one is called Maeve Fly, described by Stephen Graham Jones as a gory and brutal and beautiful and painful and terrifying and a pure delight. I'm not totally sure about the delight part because it's very not safe for work. Tori Amos has also said, keep an eye on this rising feminist voice, and I do like Tori Amos. So.
Oh, right, okay.
Aye.
So I'm having a quick look here before I tell you about my books. And the third cover, Mayfly, scares me.
It's terrifying. It's a
Yes.
Dali-esque hellscape.
Yes, there's kind of a doll thing happening at the bottom there.
Yes.
Which is scary. And I'm interested to find out how you've squashed this into Once Upon a Time theme. But I should tell you my books first and then we'll get into it. So my first one is actually 2 books. And they are the same series. And as you can see, they're very thick. So I have Threadneedle and then Shadow Stitch by Carrie Thomas. And they are wonderfully wonderful. They're fantasy books and they're about witches and in the modern world, and might just kind of squish in with your second book there about how women are treated and things.
Right.
And as a homage to Pari, my other book is You Choose by Nick Sherratt and Pippa Goodhart. And this fits into the theme very well. I'll start babbling about this. So it is a lovely picture book, and basically it's you decide the story. So it's not a story that's set out for you and you choose where you go. It's basically lots of pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm
Gorgeous
gonna show,
illustrations, yeah.
Sarah here. I can't show you at home, sorry. And basically it is the first page, if you could go anywhere, where would you go? And there's lots of different pictures. There's deserts, there's waterfalls, there's cities. The next page, for example, is who would you like as your friend and family, and there's loads of portraits of different people.
It's very Wes Wally-esque, but in a much more vivid colour pattern.
Yes,
and,
yes.
really
And
interesting style.
basically, each time you go through this book, you will do something different. This is a slightly tattered copy. It is.
Oh, it's well loved.
It's well loved. Then we've got what kind of home would you choose, and again, there's lots of different pictures. I quite like the big pink castle, but there's a windmill. There's all sorts of things.
Lime green spaceship.
Yes,
That's
it's
the one I'd go
excellent.
for, absolutely.
And then there's how would you decorate your house. There's all
this is
sorts
adorable.
of things, and it's a brilliant book to do with kids. You know, a small group of kids that you can sit, and you know each kid would have a different thing that they would do, and to me it encompasses the whole Once Upon a Time story type thing.
Yes.
You know, you could start at the beginning and you could say, right, I want to live in the pink castle. You know, my friends would be, you know, a knight in shining armour. I would have, you know, lots of mirrors in the house in the castle.
It's great to empower children to make their own choices, because so often you see kids that they're wanting to choose things but been told no, so that's really magical.
Exactly.
These beautiful, and the pictures are very kind of sticker-like.
Yes, they pop.
Yeah, they
absolutely
do.
Pop. And there's something for everyone, you know, they have
Yeah.
thought about. So on the food page, what's your favourite, you know, food you would like? You know, there's everything from pizzas and popcorn to a cauldron of
Frogs' legs.
yes,
Spiders, wiggly worms.
Yes, there's all sorts of things. There's also wee characters that kind of take you through the story. And it's a great way, you know, with younger kids, you could say, right, where's the cat on this page? You know, give some of the characters names.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great way of helping kids use their imagination.
It's drawn in a way that children will remember for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of my favourite pages is there's a whole clothes page, but what kind of pet would you have? And there's everything here you can think of.
Yes.
Yes.
Even earwig. Are they called earwigs or earwigs?
Earwigs. Yeah, earwigs.
But yes, some children are more drawn to insects than cute things, so it's nice and inclusive.
But there's a dragon, which is what I would choose as my... It looks like a friendly dragon.
Yes.
You know, which is good. But there's all sorts of things here. A very friendly looking panda.
And a robot dog. I have several robot dogs, so
yes,
you know, you've got to be realistic, and there are such things as allergies.
And when you're living in your spaceship, your lime green spaceship, that's probably the kind of
it's helping kids figure out their preferences, and having preferences in life as a child is a really important thing as well, and getting a sense of identity. So it's beautiful that they're getting to choose these things.
And there's no judgment if they want a unicorn or they want a worm. There is a wiggly worm. You know, they can have anything they want, basically. There's a lovely page with lots of different jobs, and I like the fact there is a library worker as a choice.
This is cute. So I'm seeing maybe like 60 different squares with mechanics and pilots and fashion models, people using JCBs, clown there in the middle.
Yeah.
Ooh.
There's all sorts of things that maybe kids wouldn't necessarily think of as a job either, if you know what I mean. So, you know, I don't know how many kids want to grow up and be a dentist, but maybe it's because they've not had that idea put to them.
Yeah, just been shown different possibilities.
Exactly. There is a rock star, which I think is what most kids at one point want to be, and an astronaut. There's always you know, some kid that wants to be an astronaut.
I could have done with this at 23.
But it's a lovely book. So you could use it as kind of a learning tool. You could use it as, you know, a kind of group activity. But it's also great as a nighttime book, you know, to read to your kid. And you're not going to get bored because your kid, it's the same book, but your kid is going to choose something different every time. And that's what I love about it. And to me, as I say, Once Upon a Time is all about cozying up, having a story, reading a book, and this is the perfect one for smaller people.
It's a lovely way to find out about the child and things that they want, and them imagining themselves and possibilities, and all that stuff is so important when you're a little kiddie that's got no power in the world except the power of your imagination. Really.
Exactly, which they need to use as much as they can.
Yeah, this is gorgeous.
But we're just flicking through it as we're talking here.
We
on the page of what would you do for fun, and there's all sorts of things here, but there's fencing, climbing trees, jigsaw puzzles, knitting, discoing. Yes, there's all sorts of things, again, which you wouldn't always think of as being something.
Yeah, that's fun necessarily. If you're a little child, you might not be able to imagine yourself doing that, but that's beautiful thinking about the future too, because that's an empowering thing as a child.
The last page is what kind of bed would you have, and again there's like big princesses beds, there's a vampire in a coffin,
pirate in a hammock.
Yes, there's all sorts of things, and again, like we're saying, it's a great way to kind of work things out. There's a Santa sleigh bed,
a little fairy asleep in a pile of blossoms.
Yes, she's lovely.
That's my choice.
Yes. But it's a wonderful book, and there are a few of them. So because we love space in the libraries at the moment, there is You Choose in Space. So it's a similar thing, but it's all kind of space orientated. There's one about dreams. You know, what kind of dreams would you choose? There's a lovely one that is fairy tales. You choose fairy tales, and I believe there is one coming soon for Christmas.
Right.
And it's a lovely book.
And one of the things I like about this book is that it's not gendered in any way, so any child can choose anything. Particular thing they'd like to wear or do or see or be, and it's very open in that sense.
As I say, there's no kind of judgment behind it. There's no, you know, you must choose this because you've chosen that. You know, if you want to live in a lime green spaceship but have a fairy bed, that is absolutely fine.
Dream big.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's Nick Sharratt and Pippa Goodhart.
Yes. Nick Sharratt always does lovely books. He does things like Shark in the Park and things like that.
Oh, okay, those are hilarious to read kids.
Yes, and it's got that kind of feel about it, and you will recognise some of the characters in it from other stories.
Right.
I can't say that I know Pippa Goodhart particularly well.
No.
Pippa Goodhart, I mean, upside down. But she seems fabulous as well.
I sold 1 million of them.
Yes, exactly. There's and as I say, this is a very well loved book.
It really is.
We have asked our lovely boss to buy in a new copy of it because it's getting slightly
absolutely
used.
a million empowered children.
Yes,
from
absolutely.
1 million books. That's gorge.
Yep. Right, so I need to hear about this really scary book on the top of your pile here.
Okay, so I took the Once Upon a Time theme. I thought about how in any kind of fairy story you need to have a suspension of disbelief, and you need to fire your disbelief off into space to read this book, never mind suspend it.
So it's a fairy story at heart.
Well, fairy story origins for this is that it's about a woman and her best friend who work at Disneyland. Now, I don't think they're allowed to actually say Disneyland just for copyright reasons.
So a theme park.
Yes.
A well-known theme park.
The park, they call it, but then everything else just points towards, this is Disneyland, they're working there. The princess she is, I'm thinking, is Elsa from Frozen. And it's her dream job. She's living in Hollywood. And I also felt about the Hollywood theme. That's kind of like the origin of fairy stories and Once Upon a Time's the modern day equivalent.
Yep.
It just so happens that this woman, Maeve's grandma, is ex-Hollywood royalty, so she's like a Mae West kind Sunset Boulevard type, kind of an iconic woman. However, she's currently in a coma, and Maeve is living in this old, and I will say Sunset Boulevard again because she's living in this old beautiful mansion that's full of relics of this bygone era.
Oh, I can
with
just
her
imagine
grandma.
this. I can imagine this like very opulent kind of.
Yeah, double staircases.
Yeah.
So it's a fairy tale in itself, the kind of history of her family and of her life. However, the main bond she does have with her grandma is that she met her grandma when she'd grown up a little. They'd been estranged. They recognised a predator in each other, and she describes this side of herself as a wolf. And she will say that the side of herself, the grandmother and the granddaughter Maeve, they are wolves pretending to be monkeys, essentially. So there's a kind of a pretense there. They'll play around and play the part of a ditzy woman if that's what gets them what they want. But in the basement of this house...
Oh, we've become too nitty-gritty.
Yeah, there is essentially evidence of several dozen people who have been murdered.
Right, okay.
And who have been murdered by wolves, i.e. Maeve and her grandmother, who's in this coma. Spoiler alert, it's not a happy ending for the grandmother. But it's probably for the best, really, because if these two got together, it would be even worse carnage than we are seeing now. It is a book that you do not open it until you've looked at the trigger warnings, and that page will be like a page of A4. So please don't read this without reading trigger warnings because it is horrific. I didn't realise how horrific it was going to be when I read about, she works at Disney World and she's a Disney princess, and
up
you know,
until
she
that
loves,
point it sounds quite
yeah,
nice.
it does. But essentially, she falls in love with her best friend's brother, who's called Gideon, and he's awakening the wolf instinct in her, and she gets a feeling that he's also kind of a predator. And what happens next is very much inspired by American Psycho. It's kind of the female version of Patrick Bateman. I would say I read it because it's a bravely written book. It's essentially, in media today, you get the impression that female serial killers kill for either love or money. And this is exploring what if we are just killing to express ourselves. And I know that is a huge suspension of disbelief, but at the same time, I couldn't help but want to read it just because I am interested in reading banned books generally, but especially banned books that were written by women. There's something I like about women that's just kind of stopped caring what people think. And the 3 books I've chosen are women that don't care what people think about them. So yeah, I won't give anything too much away, but you will be horrified if you read this book. And if that's your thing, give it a try.
It is not my thing.
No, it's not the best book I've ever read.
But is it
by a long
interesting?
shot.
It sounds interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to know where she would take it.
Yeah,
And she took it as far as you could possibly ever imagine anyone ever taking a book. She's called C.J. Lead. the author lead with an E at the end. You'll probably show a photo of it.
Yes.
But if you want to be taken way out of your comfort zone,
And
maybe
sometimes
read
you
Mayfly.
do. Sometimes you want to try something completely different.
Yeah.
You know, that might be completely. If there's a stronger word than completely,
It's horrific. I think I've said that word before.
Yes.
And I'm feeling a bit sheepish about introducing that book after you've
there's
looked
lots
at
of
this
children's
beautiful fantasy book for children. It's
We're
just,
definitely doing two different sides
Yes,
of the
we
same
are.
coin.
so yeah, I sheepishly and humbly apologise for introducing this book
That's
to this
absolutely fine.
podcast.
So what's that middle book there that's now on the top?
So this one's called I Who Have Never Known Men. It was written by Jacqueline Hartman. I think she was born something like 1928. As I said before, she's French, and this is almost starts like Saw.
Oh, right, so another gory stuff.
Well, no, it's not gory in that sense. It's 39 women wake up in a cage underground, and there's one child among them, and they've got no idea how this child got there. She's 14, and she can't remember anything at all about the real world. Now, why I've chosen this as fairy tale is, you've got Once Upon a Time. Well, this is more like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Okay.
We don't know what planet this is. We don't know what time this is. There's nothing to give you any clues what the heck has happened here. What's the context for these women now? They are never once looked at by the men that guard them. The guards feed them, they clothe them, and it's been going on this way for as long as they can remember. They've got vague memories of their past life and their freedom. One day an alarm sounds, and the men, they were just about to open the cage to give them some food. They run, they flee. We never find out what the heck this alarm signifies, but these women escape from the cage. They go up to the real world, and they find a planet that they're pretty sure isn't Earth.
Okay.
The rest of the book is them exploring this planet. They follow the sun. One by one, these women are just dying of old age, because this story takes place over about 25 years of just wandering the surface of this strange planet. And I'd say I would say maybe about every 4 days or so, they'll find another bunker.
Okay.
And they go down to this bunker, and it's exactly the same as the bunker they were in. Big cage. They've got very limited supplies of blankets, food, just the necessities for life. And each cage is full of 40 dead women. Right. They're trying to figure out, what were these women being used for? What were they being saved for? We don't find out. I don't want to give people false hope that they are going to find out what the heck is going on in this. And it's a very minimalist book, and it is very much kind of like a fairy tale origin story of this child who sees herself as different from everybody else, in the way that a lot of female protagonists in fairy stories are. They know there's something different about them, but not in a pick-me type way. She's the only one among them that doesn't feel sentimental, for example, about ending the lives of the women who are essentially sick or too wounded to keep pressing forward. So she knows the exact part of the heart to put the knife in, and she does this every time she's the executioner of the group for humane reasons.
Right.
And this book is her story. It takes her right down to she's the last survivor. Eventually all these other companions of hers have died.
And we never see the men again. Have they just disappeared?
The only man that she ever looks at, that looks back at her, is a corpse.
Oh,
It's
right.
it's the corpse of a dead man who died with dignity. So a lot of these, it's awful, but a lot of the people that die in these cages are in really undignified positions. They're trying to kill each other. They're trying to kill themselves. But there's this one man who propped himself up by pillows, and he looked straight forward and just gracefully accepted his death, and he becomes almost like her prince.
Right.
She can't forget this man that just accepted it, and to her he's the ideal man, even though she's only ever seen him as a I'm sorry I'm making this really dark.
No,
like,
that's
she's
right.
like, once upon a time.
As I say, we're showing both sides. Of,
Yeah, and I do find it quite interesting, just the complete absence of a male gaze in this one protagonist. And she's grown up from being 14, which is a really important age for any woman when it comes to how they're perceived by others.
Absolutely.
To say that she's a fully independent female is an interesting story in itself, and unfortunately there is an element of suspension of disbelief when it comes to here's a woman that doesn't care what men think of her, because we are raised on fairy stories to see ourselves through the eyes of adults, but also men. So it's a very interesting little thought experiment. I have never known men.
Does it have a happy ending?
It does not have a happy
Oh my
ending.
goodness.
It's one of the most depressing books I've read in my life.
Okay.
Without reservation, I would say.
Okay.
It's bleak.
So we're just going to go straight into your third book.
Oh, okay.
Is this any better? Is this?
Yeah. So
Okay.
This is a book about the serious themes in here. The most serious of all of them is I'm sorry. I just sound like such a depressing Yorkshire woman. It's the theme of an eating disorder and a woman trying to control her life through the medium of an eating disorder, a very serious one. Calorie counting to an extreme degree. Eating in secret because she's embarrassed to even be seen eating, and part of that is she's also one of the reasons I chose this is it's also set in LA, the whole Hollywood scene. She works in an office that hires talent for Hollywood, so it's very much the people that create the stories we consume and decide how to present ourselves. You know, it's all kind of caught up in image and building up your own story through, you know, just the status quo, essentially.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just rambling a little bit there because I'm trying to get onto the fact that this also is
this have a happy ending?
I'm trying to find an angle. Yeah, there's good bits in it. So essentially, she's living this very restrictive life and she's restraining herself in every way possible, until she goes to this frozen yogurt place that she particularly likes because they give her an exact sample, the exact portion for the calories that she wants to consume. So it's just she wants plain yogurt with no toppings, filled to a precise point of the container, so she can be like, yeah, I've had 103 calories today, that's it for me. However, the guy that usually gives her exact portion has gone, and instead is a beautiful I'm just gonna say an enormous, but an enormous in a kind of in the sense of she's got a huge aura, she's got a huge presence. She's also overweight, and she's overweight to an extent where we wouldn't even necessarily say, oh, she's overweight. But to this protagonist who's called Rachel, she's a nightmare. Like, it's her idea of a nightmare to look like this woman, but at the same time, she's absolutely utterly attracted to everything that this woman represents, and this woman is refusing to give her just this basic portion. She's like, you're getting sprinkles, I'm filling it right at the top of the cup, the sprinkles are free, it's on me. And this woman, it's just hell for her as someone with an eating disorder, but she can't help herself, and she eats this sundae that's made of swirls and curly skews of sauce and nuts and sprinkles, and she absolutely loves it, and she becomes obsessed with the woman at the frozen yogurt stall and falls madly in love with her. And from then on, it's kind of themes of being good to yourself, being forgiving of yourself. They go to a Chinese buffet together and they have an absolute orgy of consuming this food, just a scorpion bowls they're called. It's like a calorific nightmare of a drink, like cocktail and stuff in their faces with prawn toast and beautifully described food, by the way.
So you're gonna be hungry by the end of this book?
Yeah,
you're gonna be like, I could have that. Yes. And
I'm not sure necessarily how accurately it does portray having an eating disorder, as I haven't had one, so I'm not sure. There probably will be. You'd have to look and see if there are any trigger warnings for this book too. I think to be honest,
with the eating disorder, everybody does have a different way. Do you know what I mean? So it is going to relate to somebody, but perhaps not everybody.
Yeah,
has
it
got
would be
one.
exactly. It would be important, I think, to look up the trigger warnings for Milk Fed and Mayfly absolutely before even opening the cover.
I am going to talk about my books.
Yes, please do.
However, I need to know that you've read something that's lovely and fluffy at some point.
You mean just in my life?
Yes. I feel as if you just read quite dark books.
I do. Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino is a gorgeous book I read just recently, and that's a series of short stories by an amazing Italian writer. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows about him.
And is there happy endings there?
Oh, it's just a beautiful collection of cityscapes that he's describing of this a tour he takes around the world of imaginary fantasy cities where everybody's got their own kind of character. Yeah,
Sure.
it's a beautiful
Okay.
book.
Okay.
Aye.
That's good. I'm glad. I feel as if that's like, that is the opposite of the
Yes,
dark.
you've got some very weighty tomes there.
Yes, I do.
Enormous
I do.
books.
So again, for me, Once Upon a Time is all about a story, like a good story. Not necessarily a fairy story as such, but a good story. And these are weighty tomes, and they are slightly fairy story-ish in that there's witches in them. And I've literally just finished the second one in the series, but they have beautiful covers. Beautiful.
Oh, they're kind of
covers.
embroidered.
Yes, yes. So in the first book, Threadneedle, we meet Anna, who is our heroine throughout the books, and there are different kinds of magic in this world. So it's based in London, and she has been sort of brought up by her aunt, and she knows that something's kind of happened to her parents, and this is why her aunt's there. But what she doesn't really understand is that her aunt is trying to bind her magic, so she's become a binder. And basically, I think what their thoughts are is that they don't want the normal humans to kind of know about magic, so they're trying to kind of take it away.
Right.
But Anna is cursed, and although the aunt knows this, Anna doesn't really know this, and throughout the book you kind of learn more about her aunt, who's evil, by the way. Not evil like in your books, but she's evil. And about her family, and about her magic. So as I say, there's different types of magic. There's kind of like plant magic, which isn't called plant magic, but I can't remember what it's
kind
actually
of like a green
called.
witch,
Yes,
a garden witch.
Yes. There's kind of you learn in the second book kind of not death magic as stuff, but magic to do with the afterlife and things like that. So there's different areas of magic, and it's not like a community. So if you're in like a coven or a grove, you don't really speak to any of the others. Really, there's no kind of like justice or anything like that. You just kind of live happily in your grove.
Okay.
However, there are the 7, so there's 7 witches who are kind of like, if something does happen and they need some guidance, that's where they go. But near the beginning of Threadneedle, the 7 are all killed. So they all have the same face, and this hits the papers.
They've all got the same face?
Yes, yes.
That's
so
quite
obviously,
creepy.
Yes, if you imagine it,
Jeez.
suddenly in the papers there's these 7, they don't call them faceless women, but they've all got the same face.
Identical septuplets.
Yes, exactly.
Is the only explanation.
Yes.
the media could come up with.
But obviously we know that they're witches, and we're kind of like the people that they would go to if there was problems. So they've kind of gone, and then magic kind of doesn't spiral out of control, but it kind of, there's nobody in the background to kind of guide people.
There's a disturbance in the force.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Yes. So Anna gets sent to school, and it's an all-girls school, and a new pupil comes called Effie, who is a bit disruptive, shall we say.
Right.
And basically what happens in the first book is that they start up their own coven. They start up, her and Effie and another couple of girls and a boy kind of start their own coven, called the Coven of the Dark Moon, I hope it's called. And kind of start trying out magic and seeing, because every witch has got their own language, and trying out where they fit in. So one of them doesn't come from a magical family as such, so she's a wee bit kind of
a muggle.
Yes, exactly. One of them is her parents are plant witches.
Right.
That's not what they're called in the books, sorry Carrie Thomas. And so she kind of knows where she's going, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Effie knows that she's got magic, but not quite sure where her magic is going to land. And Anna, by that point, kind of understands her aunt's trying to bind her magic. So she's kind of trying to,
There's always one.
Yes. But at the same time, the first one kind of turns into a more of a story about what happens at the school. So there's a bully in the school, and they eventually kind of try and cast a spell to stop that, and it kind of goes slightly awry. And yes,
too bad, so sad.
Exactly. And it is a big book, but there's a lot going on in it.
Would you recommend it to Harry Potter fans then? It seems like there are some.
It's grown up.
similarities.
It's definitely grown up, although the characters are all, you know, kids, high school kids. It is a grown up book. There's a lot of kind of grown up, not as grown up as your books, but kind of grown up themes to it.
Yes.
If it was made into a film, it would probably be a 15.
I see. Okay, like Sabrina, the new series of Sabrina.
Yes. It's a wee bit like
Sounds
nice. That there's two worlds kind of living beside each other, because the school is just a normal school, but there's like this kind of coven, and it's very good.
Effie is the one that interests me the most.
Yes,
what's gonna happen with this
and
girl?
I don't want to spoil too much and give anything away. But there's a story there, and the boy Attis, you know, there's a kind of love interest happening there. It's all to do with the curse as well. But by the end of the first one, you know, it's kind of come to a head with the bully. You know, they kind of know what the curse is, although they don't quite know how to stop it. The second book is more kind of, now that things have happened to this bully, she's now retaliating. So she's kind of come back and declared them witches. And there's stuff happening in the rest of the country that have suddenly made this new, I can't remember what they're called, it's shortened to WIPs, so it's Witchcraft Investigation Police, something like that. Basically it's like the back in the olden days when they had witch trials.
Oh dear.
So these group of men are trying to get the power from the government to be able to do things if they find witchcraft, and because things are happening at the school now, and this allegation has been made against our heroines, it kind of comes to the school, and there's an inspector there, and he's trying to catch them out, and things like that. Now all of a sudden it turns into a little bit like we were talking in the last podcast about the Crucible, that there's these kind of, but because it's happening throughout the country, it's on a big scale. So there's TikTok videos and all sorts of things happening.
Oh, so it's that current, is it?
Yes, yep. So there are mobile phones, and you know, they're investigating things. And near the beginning of this book, the ravens at the Tower of London all die.
So that's a huge omen.
Yes, yes. And in the witchcraft world, it's, you know, also huge.
Is there a connection between the omens and the seven?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not to give too much away.
Oh, this sounds really good actually.
Yes. And so in the second book, as I say, just literally finished it, so you'd think it was fresh in my head, but obviously not.
It's enormous.
It is, and I like a big book. I will not lie.
No.
Yes, I like to get into stories. So for example, Game of Thrones, they're big chunky books. There's about 405 of them. Not 406 yet though. You know, I like that.
Yeah.
I like a character list at the beginning of the book. I like a map.
Wow.
I like to like get right into story.
Okay.
With my cup of tea, on my sofa, all curled up, ignoring the world.
I'm noticing your biceps are huge from having read this book.
Exactly. But this was just wonderful, and when I'd seen it, because it's just fairly new.
It does have a map at the beginning, does it?
Yes, I like a map. Especially
I know quite a few people who appreciate a good map at the beginning of a book. Yes, it's got a very detailed map.
Yes, and it is of London. So there's some, you know, places that you kind of know, the Dorchester Hotel, the Necropolis, things like that. But then we've got Effie's house, Aunt's house, you know, things like that. We've got the underground stations, which the witchy people use to get places that are not known necessarily to us.
Okay. This is intriguing.
Yes, it's lovely. It is lovely.
Is this in the can you get this from the library?
Yes. In fact, I think it's from Motherwell Library.
Oh.
Another one I think we have here. I'm not sure what the map is like in the other one, but it is beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. That's a full experience. That must be very transporting.
However, this is only book 2 of however many books she's going to write.
Right.
And this has only just come out, and a bit of me is like, I wish I hadn't started them until they're all here, because the second one does leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger. Effie, I will
Harry
just
Thomas,
say,
what are you doing?
yes.
Get it written.
And she did take her time between the two because of COVID and things like that, you know.
Yeah, life happens.
However, we love Carrie because it's a big chunk of a book,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that the next one will be a big chunk of a book. I don't know if she's doing trilogies. I don't know if she's going full scale, you know, Game of Thrones book 17. But I absolutely love them. I love that there's the different types of magic. Like that, I love Harry Potter, and you kind of know where you are with Harry Potter.
Yes.
This kind of introduces other things,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the second book. There's a book of fairy tales that is central to the story, and it's familiar fairy tales to us, but with a twist. So there's Rumpelstiltskin, for example, but it's from the witches. So
like
it's
the real scoop on what that's based in. Oh,
and there's other one. I think Carrie is from Wales, so there's some slight, maybe Welsh fairy tales that they would kind of twisted slightly into this. And this book of fairy tales helps Anna do what she needs to do. There's magic thread. There is everything that you want from a good, solid fantasy witchcraft book.
Yeah, it sounds like a very kind of safe place to be, sitting there in that world and reading it. Yeah, that sounds really cosy.
Even though they have the whips, and you know, it's very real how they develop, and you can see throughout history how these things have happened. You know, that the small group of people have got power because they're able to influence. You know, they get all the prefects from the boys' side of the school on board, because they just see witches as being female, although they're not. You know, and all of a sudden, this very small man has a lot of power.
Right. Okay.
You know, and there's a point where, again, I'm trying not to spoil it, but there's a point where the inspector does something that's really not acceptable at all, and you see the prefect suddenly kind of going, oh, wait a minute, this was all fun and games up until now.
You've taken that too
and
far.
And at that point, the head teacher walks in and is basically like, this, you know, I had allowed you to have this power, and then all of a sudden, and then he's fired. He's just like, out the door. Well, we assume he's fired. He disappears. However, as I say, second book left on quite a cliffhanger. You kind of get to the end of the story and you think, right, okay, and then you go, what? No, what? No.
Oh dear.
And you kind of turn the page and go, but there's nothing else. It's the kind of book that I'm very excited for the next one.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to be reading that, actually.
Absolutely. So it's still darkish in its way, but not as dark as your books.
No, and I do apologise again for bringing the tone down.
We'll invite you back, and the theme will be light and fluffy, and I will make sure that you'll have to bring.
I'm sure I'll find an angle.
It could be a kid's book.
No, the You Choose book actually is just utterly adorable. I think that every library should have that.
Yes.
Really, and it's almost like having a little kind of a sticker collection, and you get to choose your favourite sticker, because the pictures. You couldn't describe it apart from anything as if a kid's got a huge sticker collection and they've just put them all over the table.
Absolutely.
But there's no mess.
No,
you just get to point at the one you like.
Yeah, I think my favourite page for that kind of theme is the shoes and the hats. It's just a whole bunch of feet and a whole bunch of heads, all random, you know.
Yeah,
and there's like jester hats. There's, you know, all sorts of things. And you see the shoes. There's Dorothy slippers, and there's cowboy boots. And I love it because at one point, you know, you can be going through with a kid who will want cowboy boots at the same time as wearing a floppy hat, you know, at the same time as sleeping in a hammock.
They're expressing a preference and not being judged for that preference, which is so important, especially these days.
It's also, I've just noticed, fluffy bunny slippers.
Yes, that probably would be my fluffy bunny
that would be my reading outfit.
And a princess hat with a little medieval veil.
Yes. And there's sort of a witch's hat, there's all sorts of things. But yeah, you're right, it looks as if, you know, somebody's got like an old scrapbook and cut out lots of pictures of their favourite outfits and stuck them in.
This is my favourite book out of all the 6 books.
Yes. And it is the lightest and fluffiest, which is great. So anyway, that's us running out of time. So thank you very much for stepping in for Pari this week.
Thank you, it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege. A pleasure and a
Good.
privilege.
And as I say, we'll get you back, but it will be light and fluffy only.
Okay, I'll have a go.
So just to let everyone know, Pari should be back next week, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed she will. And our theme, I think it's B is trying to keep Pari on her toes a little bit by giving us a strange theme, and it is palate cleanser.
Okay.
Which I'm interested to see, is Pari going to go down the kind of whole food route, or is she going to go somewhere else?
You never know with Pari, but it's always going to be interesting.
Absolutely.
She's awesome.
So we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.